Starfleet keeps its vessels in service for a long time. The original Enterprise NCC-1701 was launched in 2245 and eventually destroyed in 2285 after several refits, giving it a 40-year lifespan. Then we have ships like the Excelsior class, which has been referred to as the backbone of the Federation fleet, originally state-of-the-art in 2280 and still in service by 2370, 90 years later. Of course, these vessels would not be running technology from near a century ago, and it's often expanded that latter-day Excelsiors were very different internally than their early counterparts. But eventually, all ships and classes will end. So, what is the fate of most of these vessels? Hi, Rick here, and this video is on the most common fates of Starfleet's vessels. Starting with the obvious one. Fresh off of the Escape Pods episode, we of course have destruction. Sometimes a ship is simply destroyed. Maybe it is dropped into a sun, crunched by some anomaly, or destroyed as a result of combat. In this case, there's little that can be salvaged except for survivors, and perhaps any wreckage that can be hauled away for scrap, but when a ship goes down, it's gone, although its legacy may continue. Starfleet also has extensive dry docks and repair facilities that not only are responsible for constructing new vessels, but repairing damaged ones. The level of these refits can be extreme, with ships like the Constitution class having their entire frames being remodelled in some cases, and Starfleet seems to invest a lot of resources into maintaining this sort of overhaul philosophy, rather than simply scrapping a vessel and starting fresh. However, there comes a time when a ship simply cannot be revamped any further, and the vessel is officially outdated no matter how much more tech or restructuring it undergoes. You can gut an Excelsior and replace its inners, but there comes a point where its basic form is simply no longer practical for the advancements in Starfleet design. At this time, the vessel has several other fates awaiting it. If it's still serviceable, then often we see these sorts of aging vessels pulled from the front lines of Starfleet duties and relegated to increasingly light work, such as transport and admin. This is where we see many of the Excelsior classes by the time of the next generation. They're often used as flagships by the Admiralty, who show an appreciated lack of hubris in not using the newest ships in the fleet as their own horse and carriage, instead leaving the advanced stuff where it is needed most, in the hands of Starfleet captains. Some of these vessels are eventually designated training ships too, and assigned to work with Starfleet Academy. While these vessels still maintain a captain, their role is to take on Starfleet cadets and give hands-on experience with a starship. The commander of such a vessel retains overall authority of the ship, but much of the crew will be rotated out as fresh trainees are assigned to learn in various divisions. At times, even command is temporarily turned over to cadets in the command division under the watchful eye of their superiors and instructors. Of course, Starfleet Academy didn't only post cadets on such designated training vessels, but also assigned handfuls of learners to actual operational ships as part of their academic career. The Defiant, for example, had Cadet Nog assigned to it during the Dominion War. Wesley Crusher was granted permission to serve on the Enterprise D at the captain's discretion, and Cadet Sylvia Tilly served her last year aboard the USS Discovery. Even the Enterprise NCC-1701 served time as a cadet training vessel at the end of its life. Assigned to Captain Spock, it was responsible for shaping and providing tutelage to a new generation of Starfleet officers, before it was stolen by some farm boy. Just because it was a training vessel did not make it free of danger, however. They were still active vessels engaged in operations with most of the dangers that entailed. Two notable screw-ups in training vessels history include the radiation leak on an old Class J transport, in which Fleet Captain Christopher Pike and several cadets were exposed to dangerous delta radiation emissions from a ruptured baffle plate. The legendary captain managed to save all of the cadets but was crippled in the act, earning a commendation of valour to be named after him. The other incident was when the USS Valiant NCC 74210 was crewed by Starfleet's Red Squadron on an advanced training mission when the captain was KIA and the command fell to the cadets. Although they piloted the vessel with skill, ultimately they bit off more than they could chew and they lost the vessel with most hands to the Dominion. Ultimately, however, a ship, if it does survive its service, would be decommissioned. This was when a starship was no longer viable to function as intended due to damage, failure, or simply being too outdated to even be brought up to spec. Usually, when a ship is decommissioned, it will report to a dry dock, if not at one already, where many of its components will be removed. This includes its arsenal and components deemed of worth, such as deflector arrays, transporter systems, or perhaps even its warp core. These components were often then allocated back into fleet circulation as spare parts, or maybe even for new construction projects. Some might even make their way onto civilian markets, probably excluding munitions and such. Their names would be officially made available once again for use in future vessels, leading to the numerous recurring ship legacies we see in Trek, but the registries were not. Even when the registry was to be reused, it had to have an affix indicating it as a separate identifier in most cases. Most cases, looking at you, Defiant. The remaining hulk was then towed to a Starfleet surplus depot, also termed a Starship graveyard, operated by a Federation member world. In such junkyards, such as the Quaylor 2 Z-15 depot, the often gutted shells of starships drifted awaiting their final fate. Often these ex-starships would remain here for a very long time, but inevitably would be torn apart for their very materials, or cannibalised even further to gather all remaining useful components. Occasionally, Starfleet would encounter illegal salvage operations from other parties as they tried to take whatever Starfleet had discarded, but generally there seems to be little profit in trying to salvage a Starfleet junkyard, as the Federation's organisation had usually already stripped everything of value or use. There is also the state termed mothballed, where a starship is placed into a reserve state, where its decommission process does not result in the vessel being scrapped. This is usually done to ships that still function and are merely outdated. It is possible to see a recommissioning of such a vessel, but this is fairly rare outside of war times. During the Dominion War, many Starfleet vessels that had been decommissioned or mothballed were reactivated and had their components reinstalled, as it was a quick, short-term solution to bolstering the fleet rather than relying on ship construction still months down the line. Sometimes a vessel that was recommissioned would have to receive a new name, as the original had since been reallocated in its absence. So that about wraps up the fates of most of Starfleet's vessels. They're either destroyed, reassigned to increasingly minor duties, turned into training vessels, but ultimately they end up being scrapped for parts and then junked. It's kind of a sad and firm reminder that everything ages into obscurity until it's torn apart for its pieces, then its cadaver unceremoniously dumped in the cold vacuum of space. Oh, no, wait, that was supposed to sound optimistic. It's kind of nice to know that even after a vessel's prime, it can contribute to the continuation of the fleet as a whole, and many a ship decommission was accompanied by a ceremony of sorts to celebrate its achievements in service, before being dumped into the cold vacuum of space. No, wait, let me try again. Every starship will eventually become obsolete no matter how you try to hold on to progress with numerous refits, and then it will die, being hauled away as garbage for the new generation to feast on its remains. No, that's not right. Space is cold.